She found me alone in the vineyard maze, then whispered, "Get out of the rows. Come inside with me." The soil in the north block always held moisture longer than the rest, a dark, loamy secret beneath the trellises. I was standing between the rows with my back to the main path, checking the underside of a Pinot Noir leaf for powdery mildew. I'd just written down the bricks levels when the frantic crunch of footsteps cut across the quiet. I turned. Audrey Foster burst through the vines in a pale floral dress under a light cardigan, the hem dusted with vineyard soil. One hand was wrapped around a muddy generator key so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her other hand kept reaching for the pocket of her cardigan, missing it, then trying again as if her body had forgotten where safe places were. The rusted weather vane on the roof of the old tractor barn let out a long metallic squeak as the wind shifted. "They flooded the pump house," she said. Her voice came thin and uneven, not because she lacked courage, but because she had run uphill through half the north block with bad news chasing her. "I just went down there to check the generator. The water's up to the electrical panels." The name of the person who had done it stayed unspoken between us. On a farm, certain kinds of damage have signatures. Broken valves looked one way, bad weather looked another. Sabotage had a smell, cut plastic, exposed soil, and the sour panic of a system failing too neatly. I held out my hand, palm up, not touching the key until she chose to place it there. "I can shut the line down," I said. "Do you want me to go now while you call the sheriff and photograph the gate?" Audrey stared at me as if the question had reached her a second later than the words. Then she nodded hard, once, and shoved the generator key into my palm. "Yes," she said. "Go, I'll call." I handed her my clipboard. "Use the back page for times. Write down anything you saw, even if it feels too small." Her fingers closed around the board. The muddy key had left a crescent-shaped mark across my palm. I took off at a sprint down the tractor path. The pump house sat at the far edge of the property where the land dipped toward the drainage ditch. By the time I reached it, the sound of rushing water had swallowed the normal evening noises. The main PVC irrigation artery had not burst. It had been cleanly severed. I dropped to one knee. The cut was too straight for frost, too smooth for age, too deliberate for bad luck. Someone had used a saw, probably cordless, and taken the time to make the damage look like failure from a distance. The electrical panel was still above the water line, but not by much. One more inch, and the pumps would be gone. I pulled the main breaker, grabbed the heavy cast-iron wrench from the wall rack, and stepped into ankle-deep mud. Cold water filled my boots at once. The main shut-off valve fought me, rust welded into every turn from the decade before Audrey inherited the place. I leaned into it with both hands, jaw locked, shoulder burning. The valve shifted a quarter turn, then another. The rushing sound choked off. For a moment, the silence afterward rang louder than the waterhead. Drips fell from the broken pipe into the mud. I pulled out my phone and took 4 clear photos of the severed line, close angle, wider angle, the saw marks, the valve position. The metadata would log the time and coordinates. I took a 5th photo of the boot print pressed into the mud near the door. It was a small thing, probably useless, but I had learned the hard way that useless details had a way of becoming useful when people started lying. By the time I climbed back up the hill, Audrey was standing exactly where I had left her in the vines. She had not frozen. She had written. The back page of my clipboard was covered in tight, slanted handwriting, each line time-stamped. Her phone sat face up on the clipboard, the sheriff's non-emergency number still on the screen. She saw the mud on my boots and drew in a sharp breath. The pipe was cut. I told her, not failed, cut. Her thumbnail pressed into the side of her index finger. A vineyard moth bumped against the clipboard and left a pale dust mark on the metal clip. "The Mitchells," she said. It was not a question. I looked down the rows toward the neighboring ridge. Mitchell Farms bordered Audrey's property on 2 sides. They had been trying to buy this land since before her father died. They owned the packing facility, the cold storage route, 3 votes on the County Growers Association, and a way of smiling in public that made people forget how many small farms had vanished after refusing their offers. "They sent another buyout offer this morning," Audrey said. "Less than half of what the land is worth." My brother told me to take it. He said I don't have the temperament for this place. The word temperament came out like something she had heard too many times from people who like turning fear into a personality flaw. What did you tell him? I asked. She looked down at the dirt between us. Nothing yet. The weather vane squeaked again, slow and rusty above the barn. I could feel the old part of myself, the part that trusted soil more than people, reaching for a hard answer. Tell her the Mitchells were vultures, tell her brother was wrong, tell her I would handle it. Instead, I kept my voice even. Today we fix the pipe. I said, tomorrow you decide what you want to tell your brother. She looked up. You think there's a tomorrow? If we get water back to the North Block tonight, yes. I pulled my heavy canvas jacket from the back of the ATV and held it out by the collar. It's going to get cold before we're done. You can take this or stay by the truck with the heater on. Audrey looked at the jacket, then at the pump house road, then back at me. She took the jacket and slipped it over her cardigan. It dwarfed her, sleeves hanging past her wrists. She did not smile, but her grip on the clipboard loosened by one finger. I'm not staying by the truck, she said. I figured. That sounded almost like a joke. It was the best I could do under irrigation sabotage. For the first time since she burst through the vines, one corner of her mouth moved. I backed the flatbed down to the pump house, while Audrey walked beside it, carrying the sheriff report number and a flashlight. We had fresh PVC in the barn, primer, blue cement, couplers, and enough old farm stubbornness to patch the line until a permanent replacement could be trenched in. The problem was not just the pipe, it was the timing. At Veraison, the vines needed careful water, not a drought shock and not a flood, too much stress, and the fruit would stall. Too little. And the skins would split later when the fall rains came. The Mitchells knew that. Whoever had cut the line had picked the exact week when damage would ripple forward into harvest. Under the halogen work lights, the vineyard changed. The neat romantic rows tourists photographed from the road became a work site of mud, tools, and consequences. I measured and cut. Audrey cleaned the joints. I showed her how to rough the edges with sandpaper until the PVC held a bite. She made 2 crooked passes, frowned at them, and did the third one right. You don't have to be perfect, I said. I inherited a vineyard full of people waiting for me not to be, she said, handing me the rag. I held the pipe in place while the halogen light hummed above us. It's not the same thing. She looked at me for a second, then went back to cleaning the next joint. We worked for 4 hours. Primer stained her fingertips purple. Mud climbed the legs of my jeans. The work settled around us, practical and quiet. I did not fill the air with speeches. I had never trusted speeches in crisis. Speeches were often how people avoided doing the thing that actually needed doing. My grandfather used to say, "You can't force the roots, you have to amend the soil and wait." He had said it about vines, mostly. Later, I learned he had meant people too. I applied the heavy blue cement, slid the fitting together with a sharp twist, and held it for the count of 10. Audrey counted under her breath on the next one, without me asking. By the 4th coupling, she had the rag ready before I reached for it. My father used to say the Mitchells would pave this whole valley if they could, she said quietly. They won't pave this, I said. You say that like, I know how much work it takes to keep land alive. People who only know how to buy things usually underestimate that. She handed me the next pipe. That was either comforting or insulting. To who? I'm not sure yet. Then I'll call it efficient. This time, the smile stayed longer. By midnight, the bypass was built. I ran the pressure test, watching the gauge needle climb, hesitate, and settle at 60 psi. No leaks. The pump motor kicked on with a low, steady thrum. Water moved through the line again, not rushing, not breaking, just doing its job. Audrey sat on an overturned bucket with a streak of purple primer on her cheek. Both hands were wrapped around the clipboard while the pressure gauge held steady. When the needle did not drop, she lowered the board slowly into her lap, like she had been holding the whole vineyard upright with it. 60, she said. 60. Is that good? That is better than most people I've worked for. She looked at the gauge, then at me. Did you just compliment me or the pipe? The pipe didn't learn primer technique in one night. She breathed out something that almost became a laugh. The rusted weather vane turned above the barn in the darkness. It squeaked softer now that the wind had dropped. I took the clipboard from Audrey, long enough to write the final pressure test time. She did not argue when I added her notes to the report. She only watched my pen move across the paper, then touched the sheriff case number as if confirming it existed. The next morning, the county inspector's truck rolled up the gravel drive before the sun cleared the ridge. I was already awake, because sleeping in the cab of my truck beside a sabotaged pump house was not my idea of caution, but it was close. I stepped out with a cold cup of coffee in one hand and the incident folder in the other. The inspector, Miller, had a citation pad out before he fully closed his truck door. He played golf with the Mitchell patriarch and had the expression of a man who had rehearsed his verdict before seeing the evidence. "Got a report of uncontained agricultural runoff," Miller said, not looking me in the eye, "endangering the local water table. I'm going to have to tag the pumps until review." Audrey came down the path from the house, still fastening the top button of her cardigan. She stopped when she saw the citation pad. I glanced at her, not to take over, but to check the signal. She gave one small nod. "No runoff," I said. "Vandalism incident at 4:11 p.m. yesterday. Main line was breached." Miller looked at the mud on my boots. "That's convenient." I set the cold coffee on the hood of the truck, opened the folder, and handed him the printed photos first. "Here are the saw marks on the line, time-stamped. Here's the boot print by the pump house. Here's the incident report Audrey filed with the sheriff's office last night. And here are the pressure test results after temporary repair. The county still has discretion. Total water loss was under 50 gallons, I said. Valves were secured within 10 minutes of discovery. No flow reached the drainage ditch. You tagged the pumps without testing the ditch, and my next call is to the State Agricultural Board regarding targeted harassment after documented sabotage." Miller's jaw moved once. He looked at Audrey. She stepped forward before I could say another word. "You are welcome to inspect the ditch, the pump house, and the bypass line," she said. "But if you came here to write a citation before looking at the property, I want that noted in your report." Miller looked down at his citation pad as if it had betrayed him. The morning stayed quiet around us. Miller inspected the ditch. He inspected the bypass. He took a soil sample because pride needed something to do with its hands. Then he came back, shoved the citation pad into the side pocket of his truck door, and cleared his throat. "No tag today," he said. "No tag ever, unless you have evidence," Audrey said. He did not answer. He drove away in a spray of dust. When the dust settled, Audrey stood with both hands tucked into the sleeves of my jacket. "How did you know they'd call the inspector? People who cut pipes usually want someone official to find the water. That's a depressing thing to know. I know a lot of depressing things." I noticed. I walked to the ATV and pulled a thermos from the storage rack. "Good. Keeps my mystique efficient." She gave me a tired look. "You don't have mystique, Silas. You have mud and opinions. Both age well." I poured Earl Grey into the plastic lid and handed it to her. 2 sugars. She looked down at the steam rising between her hands, then up at me. "You remembered. You told me once." "When?" "Second day I worked here. You said coffee made you mean, and chamomile made you suspicious. And Earl Grey. Earl Grey made you tolerable." Her mouth opened, then closed. She took a careful sip. "I was joking," she said. "I wasn't." She turned away, but not before I saw the smile. Over the next few weeks, the tension on the farm thickened into a heavy, humid weight. Harvest was 6 weeks out. The grapes were in veraison, turning from hard green bullets to soft, deep purple. The Mitchells did not stop. Deliveries arrived late or not at all. Temporary harvest crews canceled the morning after confirming. A refrigeration repair company claimed we had closed our service ticket, though Audrey had the confirmation number taped to the barn wall. A fuel delivery driver turned around at the county line because someone told him the farm road was washed out. It was not one attack. It was soil erosion. A little pressure here, a small delay there, enough to make a person question whether the land itself had turned against her. I stopped going back to my apartment in town. I moved my gear into the loft above the tractor barn. Audrey didn't like it. "You are not a security guard," she said the first night, standing at the bottom of the ladder with her arms folded. "No. And you're not a hired farmhand anymore. Not like this." "No." "Then what are you doing?" I looked at the loft, then out toward the rows. "I like the smell of the old wood better than city exhaust," I said. "That is not an answer. It's the only one I have tonight." She stayed at the bottom of the ladder a moment longer. Then she lifted a cracked ceramic mug shaped like a unicorn. "I made chamomile," she said, "because apparently it makes me suspicious." I climbed down. We fell into a rhythm every evening at 7. We met at the drafting table in the barn to reroute logistics. I built a map out of string, thumbtacks, delivery windows, crew availability, and every choke point the Mitchells could influence. Audrey brought bank statements, supplier invoices, and her father's old harvest notebooks. She had his habit of writing weather observations in the margins. Fog low in East Ditch, blue jay nesting near Block 3. Audrey says the tractor sounds like an angry cow. The last one made her go still when she found it. "I was 12, she said, not looking at me. "Was the tractor accurate?" She pressed her lips together. "Very." At 7 every night after that. I set the small space heater by her chair before she arrived. I did not mention it. She pretended not to notice. The first night, she dragged the heater 6 inches closer to the drafting table. The second night, I placed it there before she could. On the third night, she left the unicorn mug on my side of the table, filled with chamomile so weak it was basically warm water with ambition. "Is this an insult?" I asked. "It's a peace offering. It tastes like a damp envelope. It's herbal." That didn't answer the question. She tapped her pencil against the harvest map, but her shoulders loosened. "Just drink it." I did. The next days were built out of schedules, repairs, and quiet concessions. Audrey learned which suppliers still respected her father's name and which ones had suddenly gone silent. I learned that she rewrote numbers in the margins when she was worried, and that she hated being told to rest but would accept a space heater if I placed it by her chair before she arrived. One rain-heavy night, she fell asleep at the drafting table with the cracked unicorn mug beside her. I revised the harvest map around her elbow, shifted my own hours into the gaps, and left my canvas jacket over her shoulders without waking her. In the morning, she studied the new schedule and added 2 floaters to my afternoon. "You're eating lunch," she said. I eat lunch. Standing over an engine with a handful of almonds is not lunch. It has lunch components. "Silas." I set down the pruning shears. "Yes, ma'am." The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was walking the perimeter at first light when I found the pallet near the access road. It should not have been there. Our custom organic fertilizer was stored under cover, not dropped by the gate like a forgotten package. The plastic wrap had been sliced. Clean-cut, familiar language. I knelt and rubbed a pinch of powder between my fingers. The smell hit sharp and chemical under the compost base. Herbicide. For a second, the vineyard went completely still around me. Morning sun touched the top leaves. A finch moved in the hedgerow. The north block waited, unaware that one wrong load into the spreaders could sterilize the soil that had taken decades to build. I photographed the pallet, the torn wrap, the tire tracks, the lot number, and the gate camera angled above the road. Then I sealed a sample into a clean plastic bag and carried it back to the barn. Audrey was at the drafting table, going over payroll. Her pencil was tucked behind one ear, and there was a smear of flour on her sleeve from the biscuits Mrs. Alvarez had brought over before dawn. Mrs. Alvarez owned the farm stand 2 properties down and had decided, without asking permission, that Sabotage required carbohydrates. I set the baggie on the table. "They spiked the fertilizer," I said. Audrey stared at the sample until the payroll pencil slipped from behind her ear and landed on the concrete. It rolled under the drafting table. Outside, the vines moved in the wind like nothing had changed. "If we had loaded this," she said. "We didn't. If Javier hadn't been late with the spreader." He was late because Mrs. Alvarez made him eat 2 biscuits before work. Audrey blinked. I looked toward the open barn doors. I'm revising my position on carbohydrates. A broken sound came out of her, half laugh and half breath. Then it vanished. She walked to the barn doors and looked over the rows. I can't do this. Silas, she said, it's too much. If I lose the north block, we default on the operational loan. If the Ag Board suspends the permit, we can't legally harvest. My brother was right. I'm going to ruin what my dad built. Her hands hung at her sides. Not dramatic, not collapsed, worse, empty. I wanted to walk over and pull the fear out of her by force. I wanted to tell her the land would hold because I needed it to hold, but roots did not take because you shouted at them. I stayed where I was. Do you want facts or quiet? I asked. She turned her head slightly. What? I have both, facts first or quiet first? Her eyes moved back to the baggie. Facts. We found it before use. We have photos, lot numbers, tire tracks, and the gate camera. We can test the sample today. The operational loan only defaults if the north block fails or the harvest permit is suspended. Neither has happened. She swallowed. And quiet? I let the barn settle around us, rainwater dripping from the gutter, the soft clink of a chain against the stall door, the weather vane creaking overhead. You were out there at midnight gluing PVC? I said. Your brother would have been on the first plane back to the city. Her hand moved to her mouth, then dropped before it got there. What if I fail? Then we amend the soil and start again. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one. She looked at me for a long time. You won't promise me I can't fail? No. Most people do. Most people leave before the invoice arrives. Her eyes shone, but she did not cry. She bent, retrieved the payroll pencil from under the table, and set it beside the herbicide sample. Then we test it, she said. We tested it. The lab in the next county confirmed an industrial herbicide not used anywhere on Foster land. A brand not sold in our county. Expensive, specialized, sloppy in one particular way. The active compound had a marker additive traceable to a distributor across the state line. That narrowed the buyer list. I ran the lot number while Audrey called suppliers. She spoke with the calm, clipped politeness of a woman who had been underestimated so many times she had learned to weaponize courtesy. By nightfall, we had the purchase record. Mitchell Farms, billed 3 weeks earlier. The gate camera should have sealed it. The camera housing was old. The timestamp drifted, if not reset monthly, and the image quality at night was grainy. But the truck logo was visible. So was the dent on the rear panel of the Mitchell flatbed. I made 3 copies of the footage, one on a flash drive, one on a secure cloud folder, and one on the old office computer that wheezed like it had strong opinions about modern evidence storage. Audrey watched me label the flash drive with the date and chain of custody number. No thumbnail names? She asked. I looked up. She pointed to the neat evidence labels. You label everything like it's going to court. It might. Do you label your lunch? If it becomes evidence? She leaned against the workbench, and for 1 second the corner of the farm crisis lifted. 3 days later, the County Ag Board convened for a public hearing. The Mitchells had formally petitioned to have our operational permit suspended, citing unsafe agricultural practices, environmental hazards, and improper chemical storage. It was a death blow if it landed. Without the permit, Audrey could not legally harvest. Without harvest, the operational loan defaulted. Without the loan, the bank forced restructuring. And restructuring was where men like the Mitchell patriarch showed up smiling with buyout papers. Audrey rode with me in the truck to the county building. She was quiet, but not blank. Her hands rested on the manila folder in her lap. She had dressed for the hearing in a buttoned cardigan and boots still marked faintly with vineyard dust. I'd tried to polish my work boots and failed in a way that felt honest. The hearing room was packed with local growers. Mrs. Alvarez sat in the second row with a cloth bag full of something that smelled like cinnamon and judgment. Javier sat behind her, hat in his hands. Audrey's brother, Daniel, stood near the back wall in a city suit that looked uncomfortable under fluorescent lights. The Mitchell patriarch sat at the front table. He had expensive boots, a cheap smile, and the smooth confidence of a man used to other people absorbing his consequences. He spent 20 minutes outlining our negligence, the pipe break, the alleged runoff, the improperly stored chemicals. He used the words community responsibility twice and family legacy once, which made Audrey's hand tighten on the folder. When he finished, the board chairman looked down at his notes. "Ms. Foster, do you have a response?" I leaned toward Audrey, keeping my voice low. "Do you want me to present the evidence, or do you want to open?" She looked at the board, then at Mitchell. "Present the evidence," she said. "I'll close it." I stood. "My name is Silas Walker. I manage the Foster Vineyard. I opened the manila folder. 2 days ago, we discovered a pallet of our fertilizer contaminated with industrial herbicide, not stored improperly. Contaminated." A murmur moved through the room. I handed the chemical analysis to the clerk. "The compound is not used at Foster. It is not sold in this county. The lot marker traces to a distributor across the state line." Mitchell scoffed. "And what does that have to do with us?" I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and set it on the clerk's table, then handed over the printed stills. The gate footage shows a Mitchell Farms truck entering Foster property at 2:14 a.m. on Tuesday and stopping beside the fertilizer pallet. The dent on the rear panel matches the Mitchell flatbed currently parked outside. The footage, stills, chemical report, and chain of custody log have already been provided to the state police. The room went dead quiet. The board chairman adjusted his glasses. Mitchell's smile thinned. "That is a desperate accusation," Mitchell said. "No," I said. "It is a documented sequence." I stopped there. I had built the shield. I was not going to fight Audrey's war for her. I stepped back from the microphone and looked at her. Audrey stood. The manila folder did not shake in her hand. She walked to the table, placed both palms flat on the wood, and looked directly at the Mitchell patriarch. "We withdraw our application for mediation," she said. Her voice rang clear across the wood-paneled room. "I will not sell my family's land to you. Not today. Not ever. If you step foot on my property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. We are done." Mrs. Alvarez made a sound that might have been approval or a threat. Javier grinned at the floor. Daniel shifted near the back wall but said nothing. Mitchell looked to the board chairman. The chairman looked at the chemical analysis, then at the printed stills, then at the state police case number stamped on the top page. "This board will not suspend the Foster operational permit today," he said, "pending the state investigation. We will also recommend a temporary protective order restricting Mitchell Farms access to shared roads bordering the Foster property." Audrey did not look at me first. She looked at the board. "Thank you," she said. Then she turned and walked down the aisle. I followed her out. The hallway was cool and empty. The adrenaline of the room still rang behind my ribs. I'd spent years learning how to stand firm in a crisis and vanish after. Partners had taught me the cost of relying on the wrong people. Dirt did not betray you. Vines did not smile at you while rewriting the contract. Soil did what it could with what you gave it. The instinct to retreat flared hard. "I'm going to walk back," I told Audrey, voice rough. "Take the truck." Her hand tightened around the folder. "Silas, I need air." "You need 3 miles of punishment." I looked at her. She did not soften the words. That was one of the things I trusted about her. "The keys are in it," I said. Then I pushed through the double doors and started the walk back to the farm. By the time I crossed the property line, the sun was beginning to set. I walked deep into the north block and let the green walls of the vineyard maze swallow me. The smell of soil and ripening grapes pressed close, warm and familiar. I knelt between the rows and ran my fingers through the dirt, trying to bleed off the hearing, the eyes, the room full of people listening. The weather vane creaked from the barn roof, distant, but still there. I was used to fighting alone. I was used to the quiet after the fight. Footsteps came down the row behind me. I stood. Audrey was walking through the vineyard maze in old jeans and a faded sweater, her hearing clothes gone. She carried no folder now, no evidence, no clipboard, just herself. She stopped several feet away, breathing hard from the walk and watching me as if she had finally found the place I kept disappearing to. She looked at the dirt on my hands, the stiff line of my shoulders, and the rows closing around us. "Get out of the rows," she said softly. "Come inside with me." I froze. "I have gear in the barn to sort." "The gear can wait. It usually doesn't. It can tonight." She did not walk closer. She held her ground, offering a choice, not a demand. That mattered more than she could know. "You don't have to stay out here in the dirt every time the world gets loud." "Silas," she said, "come inside." The old answer rose first. "I'm better out here. I'm useful out here. I don't make mistakes if I keep to the rows." But she had not asked me to perform. She had not asked me to save the farm again. She had asked me to come inside. I looked toward the tractor barn. The weather vane turned slowly above it, the rooster shape rusted at the edges but still pointing into the wind. You can't force the roots. You amend the soil and wait. Maybe waiting, this time, meant taking one step. I wiped my hands on my jeans. All right. We walked back to the main house side by side. When we reached the porch, Audrey unlocked the door. The kitchen was warm. Not perfect, not staged, not ready for guests. A towel hung crooked from the oven handle. A stack of unpaid invoices sat beside the fruit bowl. Mrs. Alvarez had left a covered plate on the counter with a note that read, "For after you stop being stubborn." Audrey read it and looked at me. "Is that for you or me?" I asked. "She underlined you. She knows me too well. She likes you." "That's unfortunate for her standards." Audrey smiled, tired and real. I went to the sink and washed the vineyard dirt from my hands. She put the kettle on. Steam gathered against the kitchen window. We did not talk about the hearing, or the Mitchells, or the state police. We let the quiet work first. "Did you eat today?" I asked, drying my hands on a towel. "No," she admitted. I opened the fridge, pulled out a carton of eggs, and started the stove. "You don't have to cook," she said. "I know. You always answer like that when you're going to do it anyway." "I'm consistent." "You're impossible." "Also consistent." She sat at the kitchen table, and I set a plate in front of her 10 minutes later. Eggs, toast, and whatever Mrs. Alvarez had left under the foil, which turned out to be something between a biscuit and a moral obligation. Audrey ate, not because I told her to, because the crisis had finally given her enough room to remember she had a body attached to the willpower. Afterward, I took my toolbox from the mudroom and fixed the catch on her screen door so it would stop banging in the wind. It took 10 minutes. She leaned against the counter and watched without saying anything. When the latch clicked cleanly for the first time, she looked toward the hallway. "My father kept meaning to fix that," she said. "I tested it again. Now it's fixed." "Is that what you do? Find the small broken thing after the big one?" "Small broken things become big if nobody respects them." She nodded once, as if that answer had landed somewhere deeper than the door. The weeks that followed were not peaceful, but they became honest. The state investigation widened. The Ag Board granted temporary protections. The shared road turned into paperwork and survey markers. Daniel came to the farm, apologized badly, and was told he could start by helping repaint harvest bins. Mrs. Alvarez declared him trainable before he ruined the first brush. Harvest arrived cold and clear. The North Block came in first, stronger than I expected after the irrigation shock. Audrey walked the rows with the clipboard against her hip, checking clusters before dawn while the field lights made every grape look silver. The yield was the highest the farm had seen in a decade. When the last bin was weighed, Audrey came to me in front of the crew, her brother, Mrs. Alvarez, and half the neighbors. She held out her hand, not hidden between rows, not desperate, a public choice. I took it. "This harvest happened because we had proof, help, and people who stayed," she said. "Silas didn't just protect the vineyard. He reminded me how to stand on my own land." Then she let go so she could sign the final harvest sheet herself. 6 months later, the first real frost hardened the ground. The Mitchells were buried under a state investigation. Their buyout offers a distant memory. The operational loan had been renewed on better terms after the harvest numbers came in. Daniel came by twice a month now, still bad at painting but improving at listening. Mrs. Alvarez had expanded her farm stand and pretended the Foster harvest had nothing to do with the increase in customers. I was standing by the tractor barn, breath pluming in the cold air, watching the rusted weather vane hold steady against the north wind. The rooster shape had not been repaired. I had offered once. Audrey said no. Some things, she told me, were allowed to carry weather and still work. The door to the main house opened. Audrey stepped onto the porch carrying 2 thermoses. She wore an old sweater and work boots, her hair tied back badly with a strip of green ribbon from the harvest bins. She walked down the path and handed me 1 thermos. "Earl Grey?" I asked. "Coffee." "You trying to make me mean?" "You're already mean. I'm trying to make you awake." I took the thermos, thoughtful. I amended the soil and waited. That got me. I looked at her, then up at the weather vane. The north wind pushed at it, but it held. Audrey leaned back against the barn beside me, her shoulder pressing firm and steady against my arm. Not pulling, not asking me to become someone else, just standing there, warm in the frost. The thing I realized then was simple enough to fit inside one breath. I had stopped looking for a reason to leave because the roots had finally found room to take. The end.